the classic car sales scenario starts to occur, I just say, hey, I've already done my research. I probably know more about this car than you do.
True. That's because I have a background in sales too, and I am a terrible person to sell to because I'm like, please stop wasting my time. Let's do this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I know what I want. I know what I'm willing to pay.
In this episode, you'll get to know Perry Needham, the racing and management coach, and you'll hear the story of how he's applied principles of racing cars on the track to having a successful career in the medical industry. I'm Dave Crenshaw, and this is my Success Project. Welcome back, friends, to the Dave Crenshaw Success Project. This is the show where I'm teaching my children how to be successful through the life stories of others, but you get to come along for the ride no matter what your age is. And if it's your first time here, just a little introduction. I'm a best-selling author. I speak around the world to Fortune 500 companies, and I've taught millions of people how to be successful through my online courses. In this project of mine, this podcast, I'm interviewing people who I've met or come across who are highly successful, but not just in one area, in multiple areas of their life. They have balanced success. And my guest today is someone that the more I got to know him, the more I thought he's perfect for the show. Now, he's never done an interview like this, but he's fantastic. I got to know him through my hobby in racing. There's a track locally here, Utah Motorsports Campus. My family has a car that we got to dedicate for the practice of driving and getting better at it. And I got to know Perry through attending a few events and then also hiring him to coach us. And he's a wonderful person. Now, the fun thing about this interview is Perry has never done a podcast interview like this, but he's fantastic at it. And this will be one of the more fascinating interviews I've done because he's going to talk about his experience of racing cars on the track and also how he's been successful in the medical industry. So Perry Needham has over 40 years of experience in the medical sales industry, where he held high-level executive positions for surgical device companies, including 9 medical device startups. Today, he's living out his passion as a professional driving instructor, coaching car enthusiasts like me and like my wife, my family, to adapt to the sharp turns on the track and in life like a pro. He also excels as a race driver and a team manager, where he's earned multiple championships, racing Porsche GT3 Cup cars, karts, and other various race series. Perry graduated from the University of Tennessee with a BA in zoology and biology. Perry, so great to have you here.
Hey, Dave, great to be here. Thank you.
So we've gotten to know each other a little bit over the last year, mostly through racing, through my enthusiasm of it, and your wealth of knowledge with it is so deep. And also what I really admire is you seem to me to be a family man and really care about being a good father and husband, but also that you have a lot of fun. And we're going to touch on that. Yeah, because that's a big part of it, right? I don't want to interview people on this show who only do one thing, only have a successful career and money.
Right.
So let's start with the question I like to ask everybody when we do this. Let's start at the beginning. Way back at the beginning, you're in high school. What did you think you were going to be? What did you want to be when you grew up?
That's a great question. I can take it all the way back to when I was a little boy, and the answer never changed.
Oh, all right.
When I was a little boy, if you asked me, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? I always said either a race driver or a fisherman, because those were also So those were also my father's passions, and he passed them along to me. And amazingly, after a lot of work, I accomplished both of those things. They're key reasons for my fun.
Okay, you're going to have to bring us back to the fisherman one because I don't know too much about that other than that you lead fishing tours. So in the beginning, and I remember asking you about this, where did you first get your start with racing? Let's start on that, and then we'll come back to the professional side of it. Where did you begin with that? I know some people start really young.
I did. Actually, karting, so many other drivers. If you look at almost any professional driver, he spent time in a go-kart. And I still do. I still love to kart. I won 2 recent championships out at our track in karting in Masters, and I still love it.
And by the way, our track is the Utah Motorsports campus. We
Exactly.
both live in Utah, and that's just about an hour away from both of us, really. Maybe a little more for you, but yeah.
Right, just a little bit. Spectacular facility for karting and motorsports of all kinds. It's been out there for a long time, and I have worn it out. I'm out there every chance I get. But yeah, I started in karts. My dad actually built a kart for me when I was a little boy, and I terrorized it. Yeah, I terrorized the neighborhood with that, and then did a lot of driving with him, a lot of instruction. He was a very good driver, very good mechanic. He was actually a nuclear engineer, which is a whole nother story. But,
oh my goodness.
Yeah, very interesting. I started driving more seriously in Portland, Oregon, where we lived before we moved here. And then mostly just track days and that kind of thing, getting some instruction. And then when the track opened here, Utah Motorsports Campus as Miller Motorsports back in 2005, 2006, then I got really serious, started doing a lot of track driving, a lot of time trials, what we call high performance driving education, and a lot of karting. And then I started really racing wheel to wheel in karts, which is a great progression into wheel to wheel auto racing.
And for those who aren't familiar with this, you're racing at a young age. Is there money involved for winning these races? Like, what is it? Recognition? Are you just doing it for the joy of it? What was your goal?
Yeah, it's funny for me because I did it at a young age and then somewhat put it on hold until I was old enough and had enough career money and my children were out of the house in their own jobs. And then I really got serious about my racing again. But no, there's no money in it. That's a common misconception. I think you make me think of the drivers' meetings that we have before every race. And in all amateur racing, which, I do mostly amateur racing, we joke about the fact that what we're all racing for is a little plastic trophy or maybe even a big plastic trophy. But
you've got a lot of those, by the way. I've been in your house.
Thank you. Yeah,
I've got a ton of them.
Thank you. I've had a lot of fun with it. But you do get what are called contingencies. Some of the sponsors will offer, free tires and brake pads and lubricants and all the things that cost a lot of money to race. And that helps a lot. So if you do well, there's incentive. And then it's only if you make the professional leagues that you start to actually get paid to race.
Okay. So with that as the backdrop and the context, you're doing this, you're young, you're starting to get better and better at it, but this isn't going to pay the bills.
No.
So what was the process of starting your professional career? Now, you grew up in Tennessee. Is that where you went to school as well, or was that someplace else?
Well, that goes back to the interesting story about my dad, because I was actually born in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Because,
all right.
And I can talk about this now, it's all been declassified, but my father built nuclear weapons as part of the whole project. And so he was, I didn't know what he did until I was 18 at University of Tennessee. Then we moved to Tennessee when I was about 10 years old because my dad was transferred to Oak Ridge, which is known as the Atomic City. That should have been a hint for us, I guess, as to what he actually did.
Yeah.
And then when I was at the University of Tennessee, I started doing a radiation research project. And someone saw my last name and said, "Oh, I know your dad. He builds the big ones out at the factory." And I was like, "Okay, the big ones." So my dad and I had a really interesting conversation at dinner that night.
I'm sure.
And so then I went on to get my degree at University of Tennessee. And I knew I wanted to be in the healthcare field. I knew I wanted to be in medical science, much to the chagrin of my engineer father, who didn't think that was going to lead to a successful situation for me. But it really did.
That's interesting. I would think otherwise. I would think that, how can you not succeed in a medical profession?
Well, he looked at it more from my degree. He said to him, he was an engineer through and through, and he never went to college. He learned his trade in the Navy and in Department of Defense. So to him, a Bachelor of Arts degree was, why are you wasting your time? It was hard for him to comprehend. So it was actually really fun when my career started to take off to see his appreciation for what I was doing. And he came to really respect what I did. It was great.
Oh, that's great. And your career started to take off in what way? You're not a physician.
No.
But you were involved in the health industry. So what's been your specialty in the healthcare industry?
Well, I transitioned very quickly, very early on from pharmaceutical sales, which is where a lot of medical salespeople make their entry into the market. It's very common. It's also very difficult to break in. I had to go through 40 plus interviews before I got a pharmaceutical job. And the only reason I got the job was that I took a minute as I was leaving the hotel where I interviewed, and I wrote the hiring manager a quick note and just said, "Hey, I felt like you and I really clicked and had great chemistry, and I would love to work with you." And that got me the job. He told me that later. And that has stuck with me my entire career. It's something I do routinely. I think you've seen that with me. I love to follow up with people I'm working with, dealing with. And so that got me into pharma, but quite frankly, pharmaceutical sales is pretty boring. Some people love it, excel at it. It wasn't my thing. I was bored. And I came from the lab environment. Actually, I ran a lab at the University of Tennessee for a famous immunobiologist, and he was the one who pushed me, you should get into the surgical world. It's where you belong. And so luckily my break came in 1984, and I went to work for a surgical device company. And that was, 39 years ago, and I've never looked back. I've had a lot of fun in surgical device.
Was that after graduating from college or prior to it?
I managed the lab in college in my senior year, and then came out, got the pharmaceutical job, and then 2 years later moved into surgical devices.
Okay. I want to highlight one thing in college before we move on, which is when I was looking at your bio and we were discussing it, you brought up that you studied business, that you got a minor in business,
yes,
along with your degree in zoology. You corrected me, not zoology, but zoology. But you got that minor in business. Talk to me about the role that played, that minor, in your future success.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm a huge proponent, and I would recommend any student in college, regardless of their actual major, add that business minor. It has helped me both personally and professionally. Personally, because I'm good at managing my personal and my family finances. I understand what's going on when I sit in front of a bank manager or, a finance person. It's been very helpful. And then professionally, when I first got in the industry, no one used computers. There was no Excel spreadsheet. None of that even existed. Luckily for me, I had an older brother who was in computer science. He walked in my door one day and said, here's your new computer and you owe me $5,000. And then he taught me how to use it. And luckily, those business skills came through because I learned how to use Excel and Word and all the database programs. And that has helped me tremendously in my career. I still do that type of work all the time.
Yeah. And we were discussing this before. I've told my kids right now, they all want to be writers, each one of them. But I've told them all, you go to college for that to learn how to be a better writer. The one thing that I ask of you is you got to have a business minor with it. And that's happened more and more. The more I've done these interviews, I'm just like, it's unbelievable how every person so far, even if they studied piano, business in college was part of the mix.
I couldn't agree more. Every successful business person I've worked with has very strong math business skills, right? They, like I say, they can read a profit and loss report. They can, tell you about the accounting in the company. If you're not connected to that, it really hurts you, especially as you move into upper management.
Yeah. So you're doing pharmaceutical sales. Give me just a brief idea of what that looks like, because my understanding is pharma sales are very different than, say, selling a car at the dealership.
Yes. Pharma sales, medical sales in general, it's interesting to even categorize it as sales because it's all based dramatically on fact, right? You go into a physician, a staff member in a hospital, et cetera. If you don't have data, if you don't have strong factual basis for what you're promoting, you're not going to get very far. You can't just sell your way out of it. And so that's what I love about the medical industry is that the product's going to stand on its own, right? The physician or the end user is going to tell you, I used your surgical instrument. It's either wonderful or it's a piece of junk. And here's why. It's all about the patients. And so pharma sales these days is way more data driven. And of course, the FDA is very rigorous about that. And it's basically get in front of the surgeon or the physician, get a pharmaceutical trial going on that medication, or whatever the product is. And then you have to deal a lot with contracts, group purchasing, and all of that.
So early on in your career, you were developing skills, forging an idea of what you need to do. What did you find in the kind of sales that you were doing? What was the secret to success? You've done it, I guess, for 40 years. So you've learned a lot. What are a couple of secrets that seem to have you be successful so that you could stay in the career so long?
Sincerity, being brutally honest in what you do. No BS, putting it bluntly. And it's really funny you bring that up and you mentioned like car sales. There's no one worse to sell a car to than a professional salesperson like myself.
Yes.
Yeah, I just I don't tolerate it very well when the classic car sales scenario starts to occur. I just say, hey, I've already done my research. I probably know more about this car than you do.
True. That is because I have a background in sales too, and I am a terrible person to sell to because I'm like, please stop wasting my time. Let's do this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I know what I want. I know what I'm willing to pay. That is something I learned very early on because, especially in our field, you really have to respect people's time. I can't even imagine what an average surgeon's day looks like. And so if I walk in there and I expect to steal 30 minutes of his time when he has a 20-hour schedule that's crazy, I'm not going to get very far. You need to get very good at quickly summarizing what you're about, why it's of value to that particular person straight up. And I often ask them right away, doctor, do you even do this procedure? Is this even something that is of value to you? Because if it's not, I'm not going to waste your time. And they really appreciate that. So I try to do that in all aspects of my life, even though I'm a typical verbose salesman. But, I love to talk just like the rest of us. But I try not to waste people's time.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Such a great principle of success in every aspect of your life. So now let's return for a moment to the racing, because we know that racing is a part and has always been a part of who you are. So you're trying to grow this career in sales. Were you still able to make time for racing during that growth period?
Yes, especially as I have two sons. They're right behind me on the wall there. As they accomplished their careers at the University of Utah, which they're local, I'm very proud of that. As they got more and more self-sufficient, it gave me the time and, quite frankly, the money, because they're very successful in their own careers, to start to really get serious about my racing and my driving. And so it gave me the ability to purchase more expensive cars that were more competitive, put more money into those cars. I also used my management skills, my business skills, to get sponsorship. And that was what my lead role was at the race team I worked for, was to find and drive sponsorship. And in addition, to find other drivers, which I did successfully for the team. And so sponsorship brought me expensive things like tires. I had Yokohama as a sponsor, lubricants, brake pads. And that's why in racing, the cars look like billboards, right? Especially in NASCAR and big series. Sponsorship is everything. And those companies recognize that through sponsorship, they get marketing, they get exposure. And so it's a two-way street. And that helped me a great deal.
Yeah. And for those who have no familiarity with this, there are lots of expensive hobbies, golfing, those kinds of hobbies, but trying to race cars, even at the amateur level, lots of consumables. You can really go down a rabbit hole very fast in spending a lot of money upgrading your car.
Absolutely. And matter of fact, the number one mistake we all make, and I did it, and I continue to watch everybody do it, is they take their street car, their daily driver, and tune it for the racetrack. And I encourage everybody, just as I did with you, don't do that.
Right.
That's a car you rely on. It has to get you to work or, to where you would need to go. Way better to purchase an inexpensive track dedicated car because it's made for it. And then if you do beat it up or, God forbid, crash it, you're not completely out of luck.
Yeah. And plus, if you buy somebody else's track car, they've already put the time, the work, and the energy to get it to that point so that you don't do it. Okay. So the way that you described that, though, Perry, it did sound like you kind of had to put racing on the back burner for a couple of decades. So were you not involved for a long period of time?
Only at a minimal level, like going out for track days. I would do a good bit of that in Portland. And then I started back again in Utah using my daily driver as a track car and very nearly totaling it a few times, especially in Portland where it often rains. And that was not a good situation. I had an off, as we call it. I went off the track in Portland once, a very big racetrack there. And I hit the wet grass and I slid probably several hundred yards and came to a stop about 6 feet from the guardrail and sat there and waited for my heart rate to come back down as I almost totaled my car. And so, those are character building experiences.
Yeah. I don't want that to happen, which is why we have a car that is dedicated for that purpose and not the daily. Talk to me about where, I know that your family is really important. Your marriage to your lovely wife is important. Where did she come along in this story? How far after you started doing sales, or was it before or at the very beginning?
The word that comes to mind is begrudgingly, dragging her along as we got
on her part, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
No,
Right.
and I'm completely kidding. My wonderful wife of we've been together for 40 years. She supports me in everything I do. And so, with the racing, she's been amazing, just so supportive, everything. And she and the boys will come out, and actually they were watching all the time when I would actually race wheel to wheel at our track. And she came to some out of town racing with me as well. So as much as I'm sure she didn't love me doing it, she appreciated my passion.
Yeah, it was wonderful to have dinner with you both that time and get to know her. And I did sense any kind of resentment or any kind of frustration that you're involved in. She's extremely supportive. Part of it too is because you're so experienced and she knows you're safe and
Yes.
keep yourself safe when you do it.
Can I jump in on that for a second?
Yeah, please.
I think one of the biggest reasons I love coaching, instructing, driving is the safety aspect. And that's actually what actually got me into it. And I don't think I've ever, well, maybe I have discussed this with you at one point because of, I think you and I talked about your son, but what really got me going was a teen course that was put on by the Ford Performance School out at the track, the Ford Racing School. They did teen courses back when my sons were in their teens and just starting to really drive. And so I helped get that going, and then I drove my sons through it. And it was so fantastic for them and for their driving. And as a matter of fact, knock on wood, knocking on my desk here, they're both in their 30s now, no accidents, no significant tickets. And I credit all that to proper driving, safety, teaching. People need to understand, I watch people on the road now, and you and I have talked about this when we drive, and it's just scary. It's just scary how people drive now, all the distraction, the cell phones, all that. And so I encourage everyone, find your local car control clinic, safety clinic, driving clinic. There are plenty of them that are no charge, like BMW does track events all over the country. We've got to be more serious about driving in this country. So when I'm with you, when I'm with anyone in the car, it's constantly about great car control, safety. I'm sure you can relate to that. And that's a big piece of it for me.
Yeah, I am much more attentive, much more alert now as a driver, thanks to training with people like you. You've trained me several times now, and some other great people out at the Utah Motorsports campus. And I've also seen that happen with my son cool. And his awareness and getting better at things. And my daughters, when they get older, they'll also have that experience. So
fantastic.
That leads to a question of what are principles of success in driving that also apply to a professional career? Because I do know that they're universally applicable thoughts.
That's a great question. Analytics come to mind immediately. Driving a car, especially at the edge of control, you have to be very analytical. I'm sure you've seen that in your instruction. We're constantly talking about vision. Vision is everything. Well, vision is, in a different way, is huge in business and in career success.
What can you dive into that a little bit?
Sure.
What is a principle of vision? Like, you're coaching all of us, we're in the car with you. What do you tell people about their vision?
I love to dive into this. This is probably my favorite topic. And I think if you asked any driving instructor, what's the most important aspect of driving? 100% vision. If you're not looking where you need to go, if you're not looking well ahead of the car and pre-planning what's happening, then you get behind, right? Well, what happens in life? What happens in business? What happens in your career? If you're not looking ahead, if you don't have great vision, you get in trouble, you get behind. It's exactly the same thing. In the car, it can mean your life, right? At 60 miles an hour, we're going 88 feet a second. You see people on our freeways all the time going 80 miles an hour. I've seen people at 100 miles an hour on the freeway. And it terrifies me because I know what's going to happen if they pick up that cell phone, or if they just start distracted, or just don't look far enough ahead, if they don't have that good vision. And so vision is huge. That's the most important component in the car.
Yeah. And if I can insert something there too, from a mental health standpoint, from a performance standpoint, the other the thing that I've learned is eyes up, anxiety down. If you're looking further down the road, you're looking further out into the future, and you're not focusing on every single little thing that's bombarding you, that
I'm writing
helps
that
you be
down.
more calm.
I'm stealing that from you. I love that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. That is, I mean, I can see that in the next PowerPoint slide that we do at our class, eyes up, anxiety down, because that totally applies in the car too. Because when you're really ahead of the car, even at extreme speeds, 150 miles an hour or more, watch a Formula One race. Those guys are, the average speeds sometimes are way, way above 100. If they're not ahead of it, their anxiety goes way up. You start to see it in the car control. The wheel starts moving more. They start braking too hard. Yeah, eyes up, anxiety down. I'm going to completely steal that from you.
It's fascinating too, because I just got back and we shared the videos of it. My wife and I both did the Porsche Barber track experience. And I saw that in the instruction, because they'd put us in groups of 4. And then there's an instructor taking the lead. And there was one guy in our group who was always in the back, always lagging behind. And the instruction that this experienced person was giving him was eyes up, look further down the road. He wasn't telling him speed up.
Right.
Which was fascinating, right? He didn't say speed up. He said, look further down, eyes up. And if he did that, then he felt comfortable speeding up and catching up with the rest of us.
He had time to react, right? And again, it's the parallel to life is so good, right? If we have vision, if we're eyes up, if we're looking ahead of us in our lives and what's coming at us, then we're better prepared to react to it.
Okay, so let's flip that question. Are there principles of business that apply to racing, or principles of personal, professional success that apply to racing?
Well, especially when you get into the economics of racing, then it's tremendous, right? Even, what you're experiencing now because you've bought a dedicated car. If you don't understand the economics of that, like you say, that car is going to become a money pit very quickly. Mm-hmm. And so once again, that business minor, having some essential basic business skills is going to help you manage maintaining that car and getting many years of fun out of it. In addition, though, I think handling stress, a race car is a very stressful environment. Race drivers are superb athletes, especially at the higher levels. And this is something people don't understand. When I was racing GT3 Cup in a closed cockpit car, temperature in the cockpit could be 120 to 140 degrees, even out on our track. And so I wore a cool suit with ice water flowing through the suit and all that, but it's still just a brutal environment. Then you take that car in that heat and that, stress, and you put yourself out there with like 30 to 40 other cars. And everybody out there is trying to beat you, right? There's no love lost. We can all be great friends. The minute that green flag drops, it gets real serious real fast, and it's very stressful. Average heart rate of a race driver will be 160, 170 for 2 hours or more. It's just a brutal environment. That carries straight over to life and business. I've sat in many executive level business meetings where my heart rate was 150, 160. I had venture capitalists who had loaned us millions and millions of investment dollars breathing down my neck as to, why aren't we performing better? What do we need to do to improve our performance? All those things carry straight over. There's a lot of data analysis in racing now. You can't hide from the data. All of the cars carry data analysis. And so you come back in and not only your race mechanic, but you've got a data guy sitting there. And he says, if you had just braked 27 feet later into turn 1, you would have picked up, 5 100ths of a second. And you're like, hey, Matt, how about you get in the car and show me how to do that? But after a while, you realize those data guys are everything to you. So what that brings up again is the team. And again, why I love to be a coach. When I raced with a team, I had all these wonderful support people, and they wanted me to win. And that carries straight over into business and into life. Build a great team, be a good coach. That's probably the biggest thing I love about racing.
When you were sharing that, Perry, especially the example of sitting in the boardroom in a high stress environment and what you're doing in the track, one thing that stood out to me, and it has stood out to me as I'm slowly starting to get used to this, you do not jump to that level. Nope. You don't say, and some people do, right? They get their car and like, I'm going out on the track first thing. It's like, you don't know, you don't realize what you're doing. You're putting yourself at risk. So I'd love to get your perspective on this, but for me, it's about getting to that level each step, right? You started with karting, and then it was
Yeah.
something else, and then it's the next level. And you don't just jump to the highest level. The more and more you prepare yourself, the more and more you can handle a high stress environment like that. But it begins with consistently showing up and practicing, whether that's
Yes.
racing or that's sales or business.
Oh, the parallels are huge, right? I mean, again, that's probably why I love the racing so much, because it parallels my personal and professional life completely. They're intertwined. Preparation, in racing, we call it seat time. You can't have enough
Yeah.
seat time. Every chance you get, no matter what, if you give me a dump truck and go say, spend 20 laps on the track in a dump truck, you've had the experience of riding in a great big 12-passenger van with us. We load that
Yes,
thing full
at
of
high
people.
speed on the track. That's still probably my favorite thing. Donnie out at Utah Motorsports Campus at the
Yep.
Lotus Experience, driving us in a club wagon at speed on the
Yep.
track. That shows a lot of experience and a lot of preparation to be able to handle something like that.
Exactly right. And we do that in the van to not only show you the racing line, the right way around the racetrack, but also to instill confidence that, hey, if we can do it in a 12-passenger van full of people, probably weighs, 15,000 pounds or something ridiculous, then you can do it in a wonderful 400 horsepower small sports car. And so that's a secret of why we do that. We're instilling confidence. But you're absolutely right. We didn't get there overnight. We got there through literally thousands of laps around that track with someone else coaching us. So I think one of the reasons we love to coach is because we had great coaches that share that passion. And I was very fortunate throughout my personal and professional life to have a lot of great coaches.
Yes. Thank you for bringing that up, because you're a coach and I'm a coach with business. Again, going back to that example of being on the track, right? A lot of people will throw themselves out on the track. They have no one in the seat next to them.
Yep.
They have no one guiding them. And I'll tell you, the investment that I've made, first of all, in the track, having someone sit next to me, experienced people like you, is invaluable in getting better. And as a coach in a professional sense, I have a business coach. I've got coaches in multiple areas of my life: mental health, physical health, business. And I so strongly believe in that value, which is why, I'll hire you and hire guys like you to help me with the car as well.
Yep. And we'll hire you to improve our skills professionally. If I were still in that high pressure executive management role, which luckily I'm not anymore, I just consult, I would be on the phone to you every couple of weeks saying, hey, Dave, I've got this huge meeting coming up in a couple of weeks, or I have to give this presentation, because you've seen me present. You've seen me present the classroom aspect of what we do, which goes right in line with what we were just talking about. It's not just jumping in the car. You have to study. I have a whole library of books on car control, racing, driving. I study them routinely. I really listen to the guys that I ride with, work with, that are better than me, because there's always somebody who's better than you. And one of my favorite examples in the business is there is no perfect lap, right? No one on the racetrack has ever driven a perfect lap. And my favorite story of this is a famous race driver, Formula One driver named Nelson Piquet. He was being interviewed after a race, and the woman said to him, I don't understand this racing. All you do is go around and around and around. What's the point? And he said, well, what sports do you play? And she said, well, I play tennis. He goes, okay. So you just hit the ball back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. What's the point?
Yeah.
And she said, well, I'm trying to get better. I'm trying to hit the ball perfectly. And he said, and I'm trying to drive a perfect lap, and I never will. And so it's that pursuit of excellence, that pursuit of perfection. And going back to what you said, practice makes perfect, right? And perfect practice makes perfect racing. And so we love that aspect of it. And I was the same way in business, and I'm a fierce competitor. I love to compete, and I love those aspects of it.
And the beautiful thing about racing and also in business is the feedback is usually immediate.
Yes.
You will be rewarded for good behavior.
Or
going
punished.
faster. Exactly. Just going faster or being more aggressive is not necessarily rewarding. It often will get you slower times. And so it will teach you what you're doing. So let's go back to the business for a second, because coaching is a part of your career. And what sort of coaching did you do in a professional sense
Great question.
to help people succeed?
So though I made it to the executive level of multiple companies, and I've been involved in, like you said in my intro, I've been involved in 9 startup companies, which is a lot of fun. The biggest coaching aspect was always team building. Team building was everything to me because it was hammered into me early in my career. And so, like I say, even though I made it to the executive level of these companies, I actually always enjoyed the middle management level the most. When people ask me, what was your favorite job over all those years? It was always regional manager, regional director, because I had to build a team of salespeople. And it's very competitive in our industry, just like it is in any other industry. I wanted my team to be the best team in the country. And in addition to that, I spent 7 years in marketing in my industry. And so I recognized the importance of that marketing team supporting our sales effort, which is unusual, as you know. In almost every business, marketing and sales actually fight. They don't tend to work together. And that's so sad because they're so codependent. And so in addition to my sales team, I built the support team, marketing people, customer service, engineering, R&D, anyone who could make it easier for my sales guys to do their job and win and succeed. And that carries over straight over into racing. You watch the big race teams, Penske, Ganassi, the Formula One teams, Ferrari, NASCAR, whichever series, all the way down to the smallest amateur team. They're only as good as the team. And to your point earlier, the driver's only as good as the team behind him. If you don't give me a great car and great support, I can't win.
What's something specific that you did, a practice, a technique, a system that you used to help develop a team?
It's a great question. I think it took a lot of time, and I still work on it every day, but it's listening skills. And I know that's going to be an area where you could help me, an area of expertise for you, because we all love to hear ourselves talk, right?
Sure.
It's hard. It's something you have to really work at. But the more I learned to listen, the more I realized there are many ways to do it right. There isn't one right way. And I always had a really interesting group of people that worked for me, a really eclectic group of salespeople. And I would have other sales managers point that out to me. You have a weird team. You have all these guys that are really different. And I would say they're each making it work in their own unique way. And what I need to do is listen to them and support that and figure out what they need. And it works. And I remember my earliest sales management job, I was only 27, 28, and all the guys that worked for me were in their 40s and 50s. And I called my dad and I said, well, how am I going to manage these guys? How am I going to help them? They've been doing this way longer than me. He said, get them whatever they need to win, to support them. And it was a great lesson. It has helped me tremendously.
That's so powerful. The other thing is you're talking about that, and I see this also in coaching on the track, which I've mentioned to you, by the way. That's something that I want to get to. That's a level I want to get to at some point.
That's great.
Restraint. When you talk about listening and you talk about coaching people, I think about if you have so much experience and so much knowledge. I've been coaching thousands upon thousands of hours, people. And so I go into a situation, they tell me what's going on. I know the answer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
In fact, I know 5 answers of what they should do, but that's not going to help them.
Right.
If I just dump that knowledge, it's too much, too fast at once. And so you have to have restraint in choosing one thing that they're going to work on.
Yeah. And it's hard. In our profession, we actually have an expression for that. We call it barfing all over the customer, because the salespeople get trained so heavily, right? And they fly out into the world and they've got all this amazing knowledge and they want to share it with the surgeon or whoever they're talking to. And they just barf it all over the customer. And the doctor stands there and goes, I don't even do that procedure. I don't know why you're wasting my time, right? So yeah, it's all about asking the right questions and listening. And once again, crossing over to the racing. You've been with me in the car. You know, it's hard for me to exercise that restraint.
Oh yeah.
It's hard.
Especially when it's going fast.
Oh yeah.
Right? That's the hardest time.
Fast. Oh yeah. And so I'm sitting there dying to say, okay, Dave, that was great, but da-da-da-da-da. But it's way better if I just let you focus on 1 or 2 things and we get you really comfortable. And then we add skills. That's probably my biggest challenge as an instructor and as a driver. If you talk to any of my crew chiefs, the guys who are in my ears when I'm driving, the number one thing they all say to me is stop over driving the car. Okay. We know you're aggressive. We know you're competitive. You're driving the wheels off the car. Literally, you're destroying the tires. You're pushing too hard, take a breath, calm down.
And it's one thing.
Yep.
One thing to focus on, which, by the way, we're going to do something about that at the end. There's
cool. I love it. I need all help I can get.
One more thing that I want to ask you about, again, going back to that concept of balanced success, not just financial. What are some specific strategies that you used through your professional career to make sure that you had time for your wife, you had time for your sons, had time even to do fun things like the fishing? What did you do structurally speaking or systemically to make sure that could happen?
Oh man, if there's one challenge in professional and fun life, that's it, right? Is the balance. And I had to travel a lot. My job involved a lot of travel. I've been in every major hospital in the country at one time or another over the last 40 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm well over almost to 3 million miles on the local airline. It's crazy. And so it's a perfect question. So that maintaining that balance and still being there for your wife and kids, being at those birthday parties, being at those sporting events, things like that, you basically have to mandate that. Okay. It has to become a huge priority, and that can be difficult. And a lot of times I would say to myself, boy, I don't know if I can do that. It could cost me my job. It could cost me this deal, this sale or whatever. And, I'm lucky now. I'm almost 64 years old. I'll be 64 this month. So the older you get, the more you realize, wow, I wish I'd known then what I know now. So what I learned over the years was the job isn't life. My family's my life, right? Priority.
Yeah. You use such an interesting word there too, Perry. Mandate.
Yes. Yes.
I have a book called The Power of Having Fun. And one of the working titles, we went through 100 titles for that. One of them was Mandatory Chocolate. Not a great title, but it meant the idea that you have to mandate that you have fun, that it's something that is a requirement to your success and a requirement to your family success, to budget that in and say, I will do this. This is a top priority, and other things have to flow around it, not the other way around.
Exactly. And both of us know examples of the other side of it, where the family suffers, the family structure falls apart, the marriage falls apart because of prioritization of career, success, money, materialistic things. I've been really lucky that I had this great career that provided for me and my family really well, and I get to do all these amazing, fun things. But at the same time, boy, I prioritized hard, and it's a very difficult challenge. Having that balance in your life is incredibly challenging.
Yeah, but worth it.
Absolutely.
So worth it.
Wouldn't trade it for anything.
What's next for you, Perry? Where do you see things unfolding over the next 5 years or so?
That's a great question. So at the end of 2021, I've been trying to retire for about 5 years. Okay. 40 years in one industry or one job or is a long time. My wife would be dying laughing right now. She'd be like, yeah, sure, you're going to retire. So I've continued to consult for a small startup company that I've been working for several years, only because I really like the company and I really like the people, and it doesn't take a lot of my time. So I'm happy to help them out. It also helps fund my new career, which I don't see myself as retiring. I see myself as moving into a new phase, a new stage of my life, and a new career. And that new career is definitely driving instruction, coaching, because I absolutely love it. And then you mentioned earlier, I'm going to start doing some guiding fishing. I'm a pretty serious fisherman. I bought a much more serious boat a couple of years ago that actually my wife picked out, just how great my wife is. And
I like that you're using the word serious, by the way, for things that are fun.
Absolutely.
I'm getting serious about having fun. With
Absolutely. I'm always serious about having fun. If it isn't fun, it isn't worth doing. And so take the things you love, right? I'm very passionate about those things in addition to skiing and hiking and camping and all kinds of other things. I like to have fun. And so you've got to figure out how you make that work. And so for me to now be able to do that and have it be something I get to share, my passion things I love to do, and make kind of a second career out of it it's extremely exciting. Yeah. And I actually have an
Yeah.
interview with another company this afternoon for a potential driving coach job. And so I'll tell you more about that when we talk next.
Oh yeah, I'm excited. I know a little bit about that, and I'm envious and thrilled for you.
Well, I'll help you too.
That
I want to see you
hopefully
do
that'll
this
happen.
too. You've expressed your interest in being a driving coach, and you have the skills both from the behind the wheel side and obviously, business skills, your coaching skills. And so I'm all about helping you become a driving coach as well. Let's
No, I
do it.
appreciate that. Yeah, I started doing it just, using autocross, which if you're not familiar with this, it's just driving around cones, but it's actually requires a
So
lot of
fun.
discipline.
Yep.
And I started doing that, took my brother-in-law out, and I was like, I want to do this all the time. I get to scratch that coaching itch, but I get to do it on something fun.
Oh, yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Autocross, we didn't mention that in the progression, karting and driving and all that. Autocross is a fantastic way to build driving skills in a much slower controlled setting. And there's a lot of camaraderie. It's really fun. I highly recommend it.
Yeah. It's a great place to get started with little to no risk. All right. So, Perry, this is the point in the interview where I go back and I think about what we discussed. And what I encourage people who listen to this to do with every episode is take action. Choose one thing that you heard and do it. Because it's not about the knowledge that we gained. It's not about hearing this nice story from Perry, which was a lovely story, but it's what will you do as a result of it. So what I'm going to do is highlight 3 things that I saw that someone might do, some specific action steps they can take. And then I'd like you at the end, Perry, to add 1 or 2 if you'd like to add to that.
Great. I love it.
So the first thing, and we saw this kind of crop up everywhere throughout this, a thread was to do the little things. For instance, when you were applying for a job, you wrote the thank you note, right? And when you're trying to improve in an area, you make little adjustments that add up on it.
Right.
And so what I would say, if you're listening to this, is ask yourself, what's one little change that I can make in my career that will help me be more successful? What's one little habit that I can add to things and make that a part of your schedule? So the next part of that will help you identify those little things is to get a coach. And if you can't afford a coach, because coach in my mind is a professional relationship where you're paying someone. If you can't afford a coach, get a mentor.
Right.
And find someone who will give you feedback on the things that you're doing, who can step outside of you and either through a conversation with them or them riding along, whether that's in the car or at work. Yep. And then they can say, hey, I noticed that you make this one little change. Get someone to help you with that. A coach, a mentor, a third party outside of you is absolutely invaluable and essential. It's worth the investment. And then related to that is seat time, right? We talked about that idea of getting the hours in the wheel. And a lot of people are afraid of reps. They're afraid of repeating the thing over and over and over because they think that that's going to be boring.
Right.
But getting the reps, getting the seat time is the thing that's required to increase the level at which you're performing. Again, whether you're starting at karting, going to autocross, and then trying to get on the track and then wheel-to-wheel racing like Perry, you've got to spend the time in that. Or if you're trying to get from starting your career, let's say at a sales level like Perry was, to the point where you're an executive, you've got to get the seat time and budget for it and say, I'm going to get these number of hours in my schedule on a weekly basis. So those are 3 things that stood out to me of like 10, but I'm going to show restraint and only pick 3. Perry, what would you suggest as an action that someone could take?
Wow, those are all really, really good. I would circle back to vision, right? Keep your vision going. Really think about what's ahead for you. Really plan. You can't just live day to day. Carpe diem, that's great and all that, seize the day. But if you're not thinking ahead and planning ahead, the stress comes in. And the best way I've always organized my stress is through organization. I try to be very organized, almost to a fault. Be analytical, really think about, what you want to do, what you need to do, what's right for you, and then put it on paper. Plan it.
Yes.
I
was waiting for that.
That is huge for me. If I don't, I have notes all over my desk right here. Do this, do that. I have massive spreadsheets for everything I do. My wife cracks up. Everybody laughs at my spreadsheets. But it keeps me on track. It keeps me ahead of the game for the most part, right? I mean, we all get behind, but
Sure.
that to me, staying ahead of the game, everything, stay on top of it, manage your stress.
Yes. I especially love putting it down in writing, putting a vision down of where you're going to be in the future. Where are you headed? Why are you doing these things? That's absolutely essential. So, Perry, this has been a joy. I'm so glad I asked you to do this because I'm not going to have the opportunity to interview that many people who are have a successful professional career and involved in racing. It's a special
Well, we
opportunity.
share that love, right? You now share my addiction. And as we say, I'm both a user and a dealer.
Yes.
So now
I think
you have my
I'm
addiction.
headed that direction. Yeah.
And I look forward to continuing that with you, both in the car and outside. It was great. I love spending time with you and your wife. I'd really love to have some time in the car with your kids, because I'd like to see them have a great, safe future in driving. And I really appreciate you asking me to do this. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, Perry.
Thank
you. For those of you who are listening, thank you for listening. Just like I say every time, do something about what you heard. It's not about the knowledge that you gained. It's about what you do with the knowledge. And if you do just one little thing about what you heard today, you're going to take just a little bit of Perry with you for the rest of your life. So thanks for listening, and go have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Dave.
You've been listening to the Dave Crenshaw Success Project, hosted by my dad, Dave Crenshaw, and produced by Invaluable Incorporated. Sound editing was done by my brother, Stratton Crenshaw. Research and assistant production by Victoria Bedez. Voiceover by me, Darcy Crenshaw. And the music is by Ryan Brady via Pond 5 licensing. Please subscribe to the Dave Crenshaw Success Project on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to get your podcasts. And please don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. See you next time.